The ocean was silent, far too silent. On July 28, 1945, the USS Indianapolis cut through the dark waters of the Philippine Sea, alone. No escort, no warning, just miles of empty horizon stretching endlessly in every direction. Hours earlier, the ship had completed a mission so secret, so critical, that even most of the crew had no idea what they had carried. A wooden crate, sealed and guarded, had been delivered to Tinian Island. Inside it, components that would soon change the world forever. Now, the ship was heading toward Leyte. The night felt heavy, thick, almost unnatural. Captain Charles McVay stood on the bridge, scanning the darkness through his binoculars. The sea looked calm, but something about it felt wrong. No enemy ships, no signals, just silence pressing in from all sides. And then, without warning, a sudden flash tore through the night. A torpedo slammed into the starboard side of the ship. The explosion was instant, violent. Steel screamed as it ripped apart like paper. Fire burst into the sky, lighting up the ocean in a blinding orange glow. Before anyone could react, a second torpedo struck. This time, it hit the ammunition storage. The blast was catastrophic. A deafening roar, a column of fire. The deck shattered beneath the crew's feet as men were thrown into darkness, into flames, into chaos. Within seconds, the USS Indianapolis began to die. The massive cruiser tilted violently, its bow sinking into the black water, while the stern rose into the smoky night sky. Sailors scrambled, slipping on oil and blood, desperately trying to hold onto anything they could. There were no lifeboats ready, no time, only instinct. Men jumped into the dark ocean below, into the unknown. As the ship continued to sink, its enormous propellers rose out of the water, spinning one last time under the cold moonlight, before disappearing forever beneath the surface. And then, silence returned. But this time, it was different. The sea was no longer empty. Hundreds of men floated in the darkness, covered in oil, injured, alone. They believed rescue would come by morning. They believed this nightmare would soon end. They were wrong, because beneath them, something was already moving. Morning came slowly, not with hope, but with heat. The sun rose over the Philippine Sea, revealing the true scale of the disaster. What had been darkness was now a nightmare in full view. Hundreds of men floated in the open ocean, burned, bleeding, covered in thick black oil. Some clung together in small groups. Others drifted alone, barely conscious. The water stung their eyes. Salt filled their mouths. The sun began to cook their skin. Still, they waited. They believed rescue planes would arrive. They believed someone, somewhere, knew they were missing. But no one came. Hours passed. The ocean remained empty. And then, something moved beneath them. At first, it was subtle. A shadow, a ripple, a feeling that something was not right. Then came the fins, cutting silently through the water. One, then another, then dozens. Oceanic whitetip sharks, drawn by the explosions, by the blood, by the bodies. The men froze. Some whispered prayers. Others kicked the water, trying to push whatever was below them away. The groups tightened, forming desperate circles. But it didn't matter. The first attack came without warning. A violent thrash, a scream that split the air. Water erupted into foam, then turned red. Panic spread instantly. Men kicked, shouted, climbed over each other, trying to escape something they could barely see. The ocean itself had turned against them. Below the surface, shadows circled, waiting, watching, choosing. The sharks moved with terrifying precision. Silent, patient, relentless. Every few minutes, another scream. Another man pulled under. The survivors began to understand the truth. This wasn't a rescue situation anymore. This was a feeding ground. As the sun burned higher in the sky, the attacks became more frequent. The smell of blood thickened in the water. The surface shimmered, hiding what lurked just beneath. Some men drifted too far from the group. They didn't last long. Others refused to look down, because they knew The moment you saw them clearly, it was already too late. By sunset, the ocean was no longer blue. It was stained. And the survivors were no longer counting the hours. They were counting the attacks. And as darkness returned, the worst was yet to come, because in the black water below, the sharks were still there. And now, they were hunting in the dark. By the third day, the ocean stopped feeling real. The sun never left. It hung above them like a burning eye, watching, draining, breaking them down hour by hour. Lips split open, skin peeled away in layers. Salt dried across their faces like a second skin. And the thirst became unbearable. Men began to lose focus. Their thoughts slowed, then twisted. Reality started to slip. At first, it was small things. Voices that weren't there. Movements in the distance. Shapes that didn't belong. Then, the hallucinations began. One man suddenly pointed toward the horizon. "Land," he shouted. Others turned. And for a moment, they saw it too. A perfect island. Green trees. Fresh water. Safety. It looked so real, so close. Without thinking, some of them began to swim. They kicked weakly through the water, chasing something that didn't exist. The group shouted after them, but it was too late. They disappeared into the distance and never came back. As the hours dragged on, the mind became the enemy. Friends turned into threats. One sailor grabbed another, screaming that he was a spy, that he wasn't real. They fought, weak but desperate, splashing in slow, exhausted movements. There was no logic left. Only fear. Only confusion. Some men began talking to the dead, holding on to lifeless bodies, whispering, laughing, as if nothing had changed. Others simply stared into the water, eyes empty, completely gone. And then came the worst mistake. The thirst broke them. One man scooped seawater into his hands and drank. Relief lasted only seconds. Then came the madness. His body convulsed. His mind snapped. He laughed, then screamed, then tore at his own skin before slipping beneath the surface. More followed, driven by desperation. Each one, losing themselves faster than the last. Time no longer existed. Day and night blurred into one endless nightmare. The group grew smaller, quieter, until even the screams began to fade. Some men simply let go. They loosened their grip on life vests, closed their eyes, and drifted down into the dark. Not because they were attacked, not because they were injured, but because they had nothing left. By the fourth night, what remained of the crew was barely human. Broken bodies, shattered minds, floating in silence, and still, no rescue, only the endless ocean, and the slow collapse of everything they once were. On the fourth day, something changed. Far above the endless ocean, the distant hum of an aircraft cut through the silence. A PV-1 Ventura patrol plane. Routine flight. Nothing unusual. Until the pilot looked down. At first, it seemed like a stain on the water. A long, dark line stretching across the surface. Oil. Too much oil. Then he saw movement. Small shapes. Hundreds of them. Men. Still alive. Barely. The realization hit instantly. This wasn't debris. This was a graveyard. A floating one. The pilot circled again, his heart racing as the full scale became clear. Survivors scattered across miles of open ocean. Some waving weakly, others completely still. He sent the signal. Help was finally coming. Below, the men heard it. A distant engine. Faint, but real. Some lifted their heads. Others didn't have the strength. For many, it was already too late. Hours later, rescue planes and ships arrived. What they found was beyond anything they had ever seen. Skeletal bodies, skin burned beyond recognition, eyes hollow, voices gone, hands reaching out with the last fragments of strength. Sailors were pulled from the water, one by one. Some cried, some couldn't, some didn't respond at all. Out of nearly 1,200 men, only 316 survived. The rest were lost to the ocean. But the nightmare didn't end there. Back home, questions demanded answers. How could a ship vanish without anyone noticing? Why had no rescue been sent sooner? Someone had to take the blame. And that someone was Captain Charles McVeigh. He stood in a military courtroom, accused of failing his crew, accused of not zigzagging, accused of decisions made in seconds. During chaos no one could truly understand. Even the Japanese submarine commander testified, saying the attack would have succeeded no matter what. It didn't matter. McVeigh was convicted. Years passed. The war ended. But the weight never left him. Letters arrived, blaming him, haunting him, reminding him, again and again, of the men who never came back. In 1968, he picked up a revolver and ended his life. Decades later, the truth finally surfaced. The injustice was acknowledged. His name cleared. But for many, it came too late. Today, far beneath the surface of the Philippine Sea, the USS Indianapolis rests in silence, a steel grave, untouched by time, a reminder of what happened and what was lost. And above it, the ocean remains calm, as if nothing ever happened. But somewhere in that endless blue, the echoes are still there, waiting to be remembered.